job as a training partner, and it's gonna be our job here with you guys during this handstand clinic, right? To essentially put your head through that mental barrier you just created for yourself, right? We don't like that, we don't need that, you don't need that, right? Henry Ford once said, you know, whether you believe you can or you can't, either way you're right. And that is the bottom line when it comes to any type of physical fitness, any type of skill you're trying to accomplish, right? There's also 4 things, right, in life that you have complete control over because they require 0 skill. And that is your effort, your energy, your enthusiasm, and your attitude, right? And your mindset when it comes to how you approach everything we're about to teach you in this clinic is crucial, right? So if you can control those and you can have a positive outlook on all of it, if you can take the frustration you might be feeling and not let it control you, right, good things are gonna happen. There is a steep learning curve. So if in the beginning you're not picking things up, I promise you eventually, over time, if you keep practicing at it, it will click. So just be patient with yourself. Yeah, I can't stress that enough. So, I mean, just to reiterate what Alex said, being patient is the biggest thing because everybody here can do this. And it just takes practice. You know, being upside down for one is gonna make you a little uncomfortable. But as is anything new, you're gonna be uncomfortable and you have to address that, you have to understand that, and you understand that with practice you will be comfortable. So whether it's, you know, getting up and being able to walk around the gym today or just making a step in the right direction, just be patient with yourself and understand that we're just gonna have to try and help you use tools to be able to take the next step. Start with the warm-up. All right, so we're just gonna start with warm-up. If you lose track of it, you can't hear me, understand me, right here. So just start with 10 pass-throughs. Take it nice and slow. Get them shoulders warmed up. Also, guys, if you have questions at any point, feel free to ask. Right? This is very much, you know, an open environment, and we encourage these questions. We encourage, you know, you guys to speak up. If you guys are confused with anything we're saying, you know, we're here to help you. All right, we finished those up. We're gonna go into 5-hour exhales each side. Now that everybody has these, once again, if you forget what we're doing, it's right here at the bottom. We're gonna start with 10 thrusters, and we wanna focus on hands being out. So a lot of the times we like to come into this little comfortable position, like for a front rack hold. Here, why we're doing lightweight is because when you're in that handstand position, your hands are gonna be open like so. So you just wanna start with 10, nice and easy. We'll do that, and then you'll just come down into 10 glute bridges. So very simple. Tuck your heels in, focus on mobility, slight squeeze at the top, and then the hollow hold squeezes. So just a nice little core warm up. So you're gonna be here, crunch up. Nothing major. If you can't hold the weight, that's fine. The closer you bring that down to your core, the easier it will get. If it's too much, that's fine. Just focus on that nice little crunch up at the top of the hollow hold. 3 sets of that, 10, 10, 5, and then we'll get started. The first part of this clinic, we're gonna be focusing on the handstand push-up. Out of the 3 things we're gonna be learning in this clinic, the 3 movements, the 2 that are most likely going to be in the open are going to be the handstand push-up and the handstand walk. So we will try to adjust that time accordingly. So you know, don't be too discouraged or too bummed out if we don't spend too much time with the handstand holds, I'm sorry. But for starters, let's break down the handstand push-up, right? We're gonna simplify it into 3 basic parts. There's the kicking up and locking out, part 1, the descent, which is part 2, and then the push-up, which is part 3. Now each of those steps has its own technique and own things you need to keep track of, but for starters, let's just go from there, right? So some of the things that we've noticed that a lot of people tend to do, and that we did, and then you know we kind of tweaked it and figured it out. For starters, was the hand and head orientation, right? When people look at, you know, when they get upside down, imagine I'm upside down, right? Those arms and the hands and the head are all in line with each other. They tend to be. So if you look at it from a profile, right, I'm in line with myself. And when I push from here, right, you can already see me shaking. It's kind of unstable, right? If I were to treat this very much like a barbell instead of 2 separate kettlebells or dumbbells, right? Look at the difference now. My hands and my arms come in front of my chest, in front of my face, right? And then when I put my hands through, or my head through, right? Treat this handstand push-up the same exact way. When you look at a handstand push-up, it's a thruster, but it's upside down, right? So the order it goes, when you're locked out, right, is the arms come down, the arms bend. In this case, your arms will bend until your head touches the ground, right? The legs bend, and then the opposite happens on the way up, right? So Mike, you wanna get against that wall? So Mike, kick up, right? Do the descent, right? Now push up, right? So what's important here, you'll notice that I wrote it down, is when Mike does his descent, in order to control his body, in order to control his balance, his butt and his legs are against the wall, but he's got space in that back, right? So now from here, his legs will come out in the way. He's frogging it. He's like like he's swimming, breaststroke and swimming, right? But his butt is still against the wall. Use that wall for your balance, right? His heels are away, everything's away. He's loading himself like a spring. He will do the kip, right? And then a split second after that kip starts is when he'll start to push. But most of that momentum is done and is used from the legs, right? So if you're doing this properly, you shouldn't feel too much of you're gonna feel shoulder burn, but you shouldn't feel too much of a shoulder burn because your legs are taking most of the load. So do a few reps, crank them out, right? Look at them. Back and legs against the wall, butt stays, there you go. He returns to that position, right? Let me switch out with you. Good. If I were to do this and keep my hands and my head in line with everything and try to kip, look, I fall. I lose stability. If I were to keep the hands away, form a triangle between my hands and my head, right? My legs and my butt are still against the wall. When I kip, that's all it is. Just cycle through them. And the reason that you do the knees out and make that froggy position is because if you bring the knees down, like you're bringing your knees to your chest, it actually causes your center of gravity to be pulled away from the wall. So that when you go to kick up, it will actually bring your hips too far away from the wall, and you will not only be fighting to go up, but now you'll be fighting to keep your back and self up against the wall. Right, another important thing, I don't know if any of you guys have been keeping up with a little series we do here called Muscle Breakdown, right? Jacob and I have talked about the importance of torque, right? So in the squat and anything pressing, right, when you use the ground, if you look at my hands here, right, when I push, my hands pretty much stay the same. If I'm doing a push-up, look at this. My hands really aren't doing anything. If, however, I take the ground and twist, right, look at the internal rotation on my elbows, right? Look at how the torque is starting to bend my hand and my fingers, right? What I do then, when I push and I twist, right, is you start to incorporate other muscle groups. The shoulders are a relatively strong muscle group, but they do fatigue quite quickly, right? So when you're doing a compound movement, right, a movement that requires multiple muscle groups, incorporate those muscle groups. And so when we're upside down, you start to twist, you're gonna incorporate your triceps, you're gonna incorporate the whole shoulder, you're gonna incorporate that upper chest. And that's where you start to be able to crank out high numbers of these handstand push-ups. Right, am I forgetting anything? No? I don't think so right now. Okay, so when you land, right here, I have two diagrams, right? This first one is that hand and head orientation. You want that triangle. Think of it like a tripod. Think of it, or here's, so have you ever seen anybody do like water yoga or anything like that? And the one pose that people tend to do is the handstand, but their head's on the ground and I won't attempt to do it. You're almost doing something like this, right? Why? Because it's stable, right? You don't see all this because you're not balancing, you're in a straight line. Right? It's the same thing with the handstand push-up, right? And when you look at where you're supposed to contact, where your head's supposed to meet the ground with the handstand push-up, you want it at the very center of your head. And the reason why is because if you start to contact near the forehead, near the back of the head, when you land, you come down a little hard, right? This is a lot of tension, a lot of weight is coming down right on your neck. So if your neck's starting to hurt, consider where your head is landed. You want it right there. That way your head and neck is in line with the spine. It's completely stable. All right, so for starters, we're gonna handle this clinic in a very practical sense. We want to get you guys the most time as possible to try to figure this out, and we're gonna be walking around and helping you guys. So if you feel like you're ready for handstand push-ups, feel free to grab a mat and try some, and we'll walk around and tweak your technique. If you want to figure out the hand orientation and you want to grab a box and do some pike push-ups from the box, do that as well. All right, so let's get to it.
Nice, Adam.
It looks like, think about so when I go down, almost think about like you're like, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Stabilizing yourself, right? And then after that, it's just a constant battle to stabilize. So, some tips and tricks to keep in mind for these for the handstand hold. Arguably, one of the most important things is how you use your fingers, right? When you look at the anatomy of your body and your feet in particular, right? If I were to lean forward, right, or you know, lean side to side, what are your toes doing when you do this? Your toes are flexing, right? Your toes are keeping you balanced. So, a big mistake I see a lot of people make when they're learning how to handstand hold or handstand walk is flat hands, right? This is no good. You don't really have too much ability to manipulate your whole body weight. What I recommend you try though is this, right? Instead of flat, let's curve the fingers a little bit. Almost turn your hand into your foot, right? So if I lean this way, my fingers can all adjust accordingly and they can control my body weight, right? So if you want to try that, go ahead and give that a try like right now, just so you can see how that feels. Right, you want to bend your fingers at that middle, right? The opposite side of the arm does the opposite thing. If I want to contract the arm, the bicep flexes. If I want to extend the arm, the tricep contracts. You see what I'm saying? Right? So you have that for the torso, you have that for the thoracic area of your body. You have that in your back, right? And your posterior chain, you have that in your core. Same thing with your butt. Your butt does the same thing. So for a handstand hold, you want to have a tight butt and a tight core, right? When you're upside down, or think of yourself at the top of a jerk, right? After you jerk and you're recovering from that jerk, where do you get the most play, right? It's right in the core. You're trying to stabilize. You're tightening the butt, the glutes, right? All that activation is trying to get you stable. The same thing when you're upside down. You're gonna notice everything is kind of backwards though, right? Because you're upside down. So it's just gonna take some time, some playing around to figure that out. Now, you look at this artwork right here, right? Should be in the Art Institute. It is fantastic, if I say so myself. It's not like I drew it or anything, right? On the far left, you've got a stick figure essentially holding a straight midline, right? What he's doing there is he's stacking his arms, right, into his shoulders, into his spine, straight through the legs. He's finishing off with pointed toes. So his center of gravity is right in line with his body. Right? So he can hold that all day, just like I can stand here all day and hold this. Right? Any tweak in your body, whether it's a hinge at the hip, a bend in the knees, a slight point in the toes, right, in either direction, is going to change that center of gravity. So if I bend at the hip, I'm running the risk of falling. If I bend at the knees, I'm running the risk of falling, right? So when you try these handstand holds, every instinct in you is going to tell you to let the legs separate, correct yourself, right? Bring yourself right side up. Focus on keeping that body tight, keeping the core tight, glutes tight, shoulders flexed, fingers bent, right? And relax and put your head through. So for starters right now, we're gonna do some handstand hold against the wall. If you feel comfortable enough to put some bands against the J hooks on the rig and you wanna practice that way, feel free. And the key here is use the wall as balance, use it as support. Try to inch away from the wall a little bit though. We encourage you to practice holding it. If you need that wall for support, like I said, use it, okay? We'll be going around and helping you guys with that as well. Right, kicking up, stabilizing, and finally walking, right? And you're gonna notice that stabilizing and walking when it comes to handstand walks is gonna be a constant cycle. Every step you take is going to be an adjustment on that body, and you're gonna have to figure out how to stabilize yourself after every step. So some tips and some things to keep in mind, right? How to fall. When we're upside down, especially when it comes to walking and you don't have anybody there to catch you, it can be kind of intimidating. You're like, how do I fall? How do I not get hurt? Especially, if you've seen Mike and I do it, we've had some pretty nasty little falls, but we're here, we're fine, right? You're tougher than you think you are. So just something to keep in mind is if you feel yourself starting to go, right, and you feel yourself starting to fall, just tuck into yourself, right? Tuck in, let your body take the hit, you'll be okay, roll out of it. I'll go ahead and demonstrate one.
Yeah. And don't try to stop yourself.
Yeah,
Let it roll.
Like when you try to fight your fall, that's when you, oh God. I hate falling too. I don't like it. So if I'm upside down and I'm walking, I'm falling, roll out of it, right? You're okay. But what you prevent yourself from doing is if I'm falling, now extending and hurting the shoulder. The shoulder is one of the most easily injured joints within the body. The last thing we want you guys to do is to get hurt coming into the open. So, just like with the handstand push-ups and the handstand holds, your hands are extremely important, right? So with the handstand push-ups, we talk about orientation of your head and hands. The handstand holds, we talked about the importance of keeping those fingers bent, right? With handstand walks, you want to keep in mind the fingers bent is extremely important, but also the way you have your hands oriented is also extremely important, right? When you're walking, think of your fingers pointing in the direction you want to go. That is your gas pedal, right? If I want to stop, let me turn my hands inward, right? And the best way you can visualize this is if I'm walking. Where are my toes pointed, right? Let's imagine I am going down a hill and I want to stop, right? What am I gonna do? I'm gonna ease down the hill sideways, right? It's the same exact thing. So keep in mind, the fingers bent, where they're pointed when you're walking, right? And then how to alter your center of gravity. Like we said with the handstand holds, any bend in the hips, any bend in the thoracic spine, right? Any bend in the arms, any bend in the knees, and your toes. It's all going to affect how your body moves. Your head positioning is another one. If you've got your head up, your feet are going to be inclined to come back down. So try to focus on keeping your head in between your arms. Anything else to add?
Little steps. So
Yeah.
when you are going to try to walk, be careful with feeling like your momentum is going to carry you over and taking those big, large steps, because that will be something where you're like, okay, you want to stabilize, you want to spread out. This is something where taking smaller steps will help you, because it's easier to stabilize yourself when you're moving an inch. You don't have to stretch quite as far. So that's my recommendation, would be to start with smaller steps. Yes, Mike?
Well, what was the thing you were talking about with like the triangle vision? I think that would probably be helpful for a lot of us.
Okay, so with handstand push-ups, you're gonna be looking straight this way, right? You don't have to worry about what's behind you, but with handstand walks, what is behind you is where you're going.
Yeah.
So that's something that you have to be conscious of. So you don't want to go up and have your neck completely crooked. Like Alex said, you can't do that. You'll put too much pressure on your neck. But you also can't keep the same vision as you would a handstand push-up. So what I recommend doing is tilting your head ever so slightly and focusing on, if my hands are here, I'm gonna put my focal point just slightly behind my hands, because my peripheral vision and the top of my eyes is actually what I'm gonna use to look forward. So when I go up, I'm here. I'm looking here and I'm seeing everything in front of me.
You've got enough time to adjust if you need to.
Because I'm not looking this way, but I'm not wrenching my neck and trying to look and get my full field of view. I mean, my neck isn't even long enough to do that anyway. So that's the kind of thing that I would just be conscious of, because this is why we warmed up our neck a little bit earlier. So with the handstand push-ups and the handstand walks, your neck is a little bit, if it's not too strong or you're not used to these kind of movements, you can stress it. So let's put the least amount of stress that we can on it. And let's just be smart about it.
And then,
So if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
if not, I have a couple more things to add. When you look at the mechanics of walking or running, right, all it really is a change in your center of gravity and you catching yourself before you fall. So if I'm running, what am I doing? I'm starting by leaning forward and my feet are there to catch me before I fall. The same thing applies to handstand walks, right? So you'll notice what a lot of games athletes tend to do, because it's not the most beautiful handstand walk they do, if we're being honest, right? They'll bend the knees a little bit, right? And it's just enough to keep them going. So if I'm walking and I bend my knees, point my toes, I'm going, right? All I'm doing is just keeping my hands underneath myself. You'll notice that when I was talking right there, it's not the easiest thing to talk while you're upside down. An issue a lot of people have is breathing, right? You tend to hold your breath, and the reason why is because you want to maintain that abdominal pressure, which is extremely important for keeping your body rigid, right? And maintaining that upside down position. So I've been working on a few things on how best to breathe when you're upside down, and the trick that helps me is actually a very similar technique to, I don't know if anybody's been in the military or seen how the military trains pilots or astronauts on how to deal with G-forces, right? And the G-force breathing. So the way that looks is simply a deep breath, right? And then a controlled, fast exhale, but a quick inhale right after. So, right? So you're maintaining that abdominal pressure, right? The last thing you want is, your body relaxes, and then now you're folding yourself, right? You turn into a noodle. So big inhale, right? Keep that going. Keep that in mind, and breathe. Please breathe. It's an issue that I have. Mike's had it, where you go and you do a 50-foot handstand walk, and you come up and you're like, I'm dizzy, right? It's because you're just holding your breath under an extreme load that whole time. Right, as of right now, I think that's it. I think we want to give you guys, we have about 45 minutes left, and that should be enough time for everybody to try this, and please play around with it. And the way we encourage this is, when you look at a toddler learning how to walk, and you guys are essentially learning how to walk right now, except on your hands, right? What's something they do? They fall a lot, right? It just happens, right? And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, what's happening on a subconscious level is that their brain's starting to make calculations, right? They're giving themselves the most data that they possibly can, and their brain is adjusting for it. The same thing happens here. There's going to be a learning curve. You're going to fall, you're going to fall, you're going to fall. And then you're going to figure out, okay, if I do this, I don't fall. But you need to give yourself that time to practice, and you need to allow yourself to make those mistakes, right? And we're here to try to minimize the amount of mistakes you need to make. So let's give it a shot. All right? Who wants to go first? Who's brave?